F. Scott Fitzgerald described the 1920s in this way. The parties were bigger, the pace was faster, the shows were broader, the buildings were higher, the morals were looser, and the liquor was cheaper. The 1920s were a wild time for many Americans. It was full of dysfunctional Democrats, crazy styles and dances, risky lifestyles, and many technological advancements. This nonstop decade was full of lively events, but just as any other century, it also came with its downfalls. This century experienced the isolationist movement, the prohibition struggles, the new ways of gangsterism, the exciting technological advancements, as well as the increased amount of consumerism and the rise of the wonderful jazz age. When World War I was finally over, America made the decision that they no longer wanted to be a part of world affairs and wanted to isolate itself. Many of the American people felt that America's involvement in the war was unnecessary and had very little, if anything, to do with America itself. America insulated itself by ways of trade, tariffs, and laws that were established to protect U.S. manufacturers. The tariffs set in 1922 were placed in order to make it more difficult for foreign products to come into the U.S. The Emergency Quota Act of 1921 was passed that established limits and restricted the amount of immigrants that could enter the U.S. from one country. A few years later, the Border Patrol was newly created in 1924 for the purpose of protecting America from the smuggling and illegal immigration of foreigners. The Great Depression came about a few years later because America stopped trading with other countries. Although isolationism had nothing to do with the prohibition, they were roughly around the same time. One of the downfalls, according to the people of the century, was the prohibition. It started when many religious people felt the need for an improvement in their society. They wanted nothing to do with liquor, and they definitely did not want their children to be raised around it. The prohibition, which lasted from the 1920s to the beginning of 1933, made every form of alcohol illegal to purchase, transport, or sell. Prohibition was caused by the ratification of the 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution that prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating beverages. This is when many Americans began to bootleg, which is the illegal sale and production of alcohol. Speakeasies were also invented at this time, which were hidden rooms where people could go drink without being caught. The prohibition brought with it the rise of gang violence, causing more gangster involvement to surface. By the end of Prohibition, there ended up being more alcoholics than places to consume alcohol before Prohibition even started. Al Capone, an American gangster who made most of his profit by illegally selling alcohol during the Prohibition, once said that Prohibition has made nothing but trouble. Prohibition gangsters got most of their wealth and power from the Prohibition because it provided them with a way to gain a healthy profit by supplying alcohol illegally. They were also the ones who originally started bootlegging and the speakeasies. Many of these gangsters took over the majority of the cities while also gaining a great profit from their illegal practices, although during this time they were more commonly called mobsters. The mobsters controlled the organized crime throughout the country. There was organized crime beforehand. The Prohibition just gave the mobsters an opportunity to also sell liquor instead of just run their illegal gambling rings and prostitution houses. As Lucky says, there's no such thing as good money or bad money. There's just money. The mobsters of the 1920s included Dutch Schultz, Jack Legs Diamond, Bugsy Siegel, and many more. However, the most famous of them all was Al Capone, or as he's also known, Scarface. The mobsters could get away with anything they wanted because they often gained their power by bribing the police, government agents, and also some politicians. Many mobsters did just what they wanted and held no respect for the law. Gang-related murders happened throughout the century. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre is one of the most famous incidents. It happened in 1929 when men working for Al Capone supposedly terminated his rival gang, the North Side Gang led by Bugs Moran. Moran's men were killed standing in a line by men dressed in disguise as police officers. Capone and his men were blamed, but there was no proof officially linking him to the murders, and this incident became widespread and known everywhere thanks to the newspaper and the new technological advancements such as the radio and television. The 1920s also became known as the decade of new invention. After World War I, American culture and economy were both roaring. It was the beginning of the Jazz Age and the economy of great prosperity. Over a span of a couple of years, the economy shifted from originally being wartime production to now peacetime production. Many exciting technologies such as the automobile, household appliances, and many other mass-produced projects created a lively consumer culture. Consumerism was the result of mass production, modern products unfamiliar to the market, and enhanced advertising styles. Americans were now ambitious to own current items with increased amount of time and money they were now able to spend. Advertisers exaggerated the luxury and convenience of owning these items for themselves. The radio and print advertisement displayed the culture of consumerism unlike it ever had before. Large department stores and shopping centers got their start in this century. All of this and more led to the technological advancements that we have today. Most Americans held extra money, so they decided to spend it on the newest things, ready-to-wear clothes to home appliances that they have never had before. The people of the Jazz Age simply loved all the new and exciting things they could purchase. Lastly, we have quite possibly the most cultural influencing topics, the Jazz Age. The country was in many ways attached to the culture and psychological thinking of the 19th century. After World War I is when meant the dramatic change from the past ways of thinking and acting to the new and exciting ways happened. The 1920s brought forth the colorful ways of the flappers, dance halls, and let's not forget the jazz music. Almost everyone just wanted to dance, and they had many creative dances that they did to jazz music, of course. This decade of major prosperity, risky living, and the bootlegging and mobsters, flappers, and hot jazz, and all other ways of the 1920s will forever be a memorable part of the American culture and history. Although this generation seemed to belong to the younger generation, its culture will continue to live on for years to come. Many of the older generation did not know how they felt about this new era. The struggle between old traditions and new ones were present throughout the century. Ray Brown described jazz in this way. Well, jazz is to me a complete lifestyle. It is bigger than a word. It is a much bigger force than something that you can say. It's something you have to feel, something that you have to live. Now, many may argue with me and say that this generation wasn't very influential or that it wasn't very important. People who disagree might say something along the lines of what Agatha Christie said. Now, I am old-fashioned. A woman, I consider, should be womanly. I have no patience with the modern neurotic girl who jazzes from morning to night, smokes like a chimney, and uses language which would make a Billingsgate fishwoman blush. This era was very important because it wasn't just a time of a lot of rules. It was a time of self-expression and freedom to be who you want. Sure, the styles were riskier, the lifestyles crazier, but the people were happy. The decade of the rise of the American teenager, consumerism boomed, new technological advances led to what we have today, and so many more things happened that made this era important. Now, I leave you with this final quote from Colleen Moore. They were smart and sophisticated, with an air of independence about them, and so casual about their looks and clothes and manners as to be almost slapdash. I don't know if I realized it as soon as I began seeing them, that they represented the new wave of the future. But I do know I was drawn to them. I shared their restlessness, understood their determination to free themselves of the Victorian shackles of the pre-World War I era, and find out for themselves what life was all about. And these are my works cited pages. Thank you so much for watching.